My name is Sofia Martinez, and I've spent my entire life being told that my passion was worthless. Every brushstroke, every canvas, every moment I spent creating art was met with disapproval and disappointment from my family, especially my parents. Another painting? When are you going to grow up and get a real job? My father's voice boomed through our house as he found me in my room, working on yet another piece. I was 22 then, fresh out of college with an art degree they hadn't wanted me to pursue. My mother stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her face a mixture of frustration and what I'd come to recognize as shame. "Sophia, darling, your father's right. Look at your cousin Michael, he's already an associate at his father's law firm. And here you are, still playing with colors like a child." I kept my eyes on my canvas, trying to focus on the interplay of light and shadow I was attempting to capture. The piece was different from anything I'd done before. An abstract interpretation of emotional trauma, depicted through fractured mirrors and distorted reflections. But they wouldn't understand that. They never did. "I'm not playing," I said quietly, adding another careful stroke to the canvas. "This is my work." My father let out a harsh laugh. "Work? You call this work? Have you even sold a single painting?" The truth was I hadn't. Not yet. But what they didn't know was that I had been developing my style, experimenting with new techniques, and slowly building a portfolio that I believed in. I had a vision that went far beyond the conventional landscapes and portraits they thought constituted real art. "I've been invited to participate in some upcoming gallery shows," I mentioned, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's interest in my work." "Interest doesn't pay bills," my mother sighed. "That's why you're still living here, in your childhood bedroom, while all your peers are building real careers." They were right about one thing: I was still living at home. Not because I couldn't find a job, but because every penny I earned from my part-time work at the local art supply store went into my materials. Canvas, paints, specialized tools. Art wasn't a cheap passion, but it was everything to me. That night, after my parents had gone to bed, I sat on my floor surrounded by my works. Each piece told a story, captured an emotion, represented countless hours of pouring my soul onto canvas. Yet to my family, they were just symbols of my failure to conform to their expectations. The next morning, I received an email that would change everything, though I didn't know it at the time. It was from Marcus Chen, a curator at a small but respected gallery in the city. He had seen my work on Instagram, where I had been quietly building a following under a pseudonym. "Your pieces speak to something profound," he wrote. "There's a raw authenticity in your exploration of trauma and healing through abstract forms. I'd like to meet and discuss featuring your work." My hands trembled as I read the email several times. This was my first real opportunity, but I knew better than to share it with my parents. They would only dismiss it, tell me not to get my hopes up, remind me that one gallery show wouldn't build a career. I met Marcus the following week at his gallery, bringing along a portfolio of my best works. The gallery was small but elegant, with clean white walls and perfect lighting that made every piece look like it belonged in a museum. "Tell me about this one," Marcus said, pointing to a photograph of my latest work, the one my father had interrupted. I called it Shattered Reflections. "It's about the way trauma fractures our self-image," I explained, finding confidence in discussing my art with someone who actually wanted to understand it. The distorted mirrors represent how we see ourselves through the lens of past pain, while the gold lines running through the breaks symbolize the beauty and healing. Marcus nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving the image. "This is exactly what the art world needs right now, work that speaks to genuine human experience, that isn't afraid to confront difficult emotions." "How many pieces like this do you have?" 15 complete works in this series, I replied, plus several more in progress. "Perfect," he smiled. "I want to feature your series in our upcoming exhibition focusing on emerging artists exploring trauma and healing through art. But I have one condition." I held my breath, waiting. "I want you to create 3 more pieces specifically for the show. Even more daring than this one. Don't hold anything back." Walking home from that meeting, I felt lighter than I had in years. Finally, someone saw what I was trying to achieve with my art. Someone understood that I wasn't just playing with colors, but creating something meaningful. For the next 2 months, I threw myself into creating the new pieces Marcus had requested. I worked through nights, barely slept, and poured every ounce of emotion I had into my art. My parents continued their campaign of disapproval, but their words seemed to matter less now. I had a purpose, a direction, and most importantly, a believer in my vision. The gallery opening was scheduled for a Friday evening. I didn't tell my family about it. I couldn't bear their dismissive comments or, worse, their pitying attendance out of obligation. This was my moment, and I wanted to experience it purely, without their negative energy surrounding me. The evening of the opening, I dressed carefully in a simple black dress that I'd bought secondhand. It wasn't designer like the clothes my mother insisted were necessary for success, but it felt right for who I was. When I arrived at the gallery, my heart nearly stopped. Through the windows, I could see my works displayed prominently on the main wall, perfectly lit to capture every nuance of color and texture. People were already gathering, wine glasses in hand, discussing my pieces with serious expressions. Marcus met me at the door, beaming. "They love it," he whispered. "The owners of the Blackwood Museum are here, and they can't stop talking about your work." The Blackwood Museum was one of the most prestigious modern art museums in the country. Having them interested in my work was beyond my wildest dreams. But I forced myself to stay grounded, to not get carried away with possibilities. The evening passed in a blur of introductions, discussions about my techniques, and deep conversations about the meanings behind my pieces. Art critics, collectors, and gallery owners all wanted to talk to me. They didn't see a failure or a child playing with colors. They saw an artist with something important to say. It wasn't until nearly midnight, after the last guests had left, that Marcus pulled me aside with news that made my world spin. "The Blackwood wants your entire series," he said, his eyes shining with excitement. "Plus, they want to commission 3 more pieces for their permanent collection." "Sophia, do you understand what this means?" I shook my head, overwhelmed. "They're offering $2.8 million for the collection and commission combined. This is unprecedented for an emerging artist." I sat down hard on a nearby bench, my legs no longer able to support me. The amount was more money than my parents made in a decade. More than that, it was validation. It was proof that my art wasn't worthless, that my passion wasn't a waste of time. That night, as I lay in my childhood bed for what I knew would be one of the last times, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen below. I saw her sneaking in late again. My mother was saying, "Probably wasting more time with those artist friends of hers." "I don't know where we went wrong with her, James." My father's response was tired, resigned. "Maybe it's time to give her an ultimatum. Either she gets a real job or she needs to find somewhere else to live." I smiled in the darkness, knowing that soon they would learn just how wrong they had been about me and my art. The next day would change everything, though they didn't know it yet. The Blackwood Museum was holding a formal acquisition ceremony, and this time, I had decided to invite my family. It was time to show them exactly what their failing daughter had achieved. The morning of the acquisition ceremony, I left an envelope on our kitchen table. Inside was a formal invitation to the Blackwood Museum's special acquisition ceremony and artist reception scheduled for that afternoon. I didn't leave a note, just the invitation with my name clearly printed as the featured artist. When I walked into the kitchen, my mother was already there, coffee cup in hand, staring at the envelope with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "What's this?" she asked, holding up the invitation. "It's exactly what it looks like," I replied calmly. "The Blackwood Museum is acquiring some artwork today. I thought you and Dad might want to attend." She frowned, reading the invitation again. "The Blackwood? But they only collect serious art." "Yes," I said simply, pouring myself a cup of coffee. "They do." My father walked in, already dressed for work in his perfectly pressed suit. "What's going on?" "Sophia wants us to go to some art thing at the Blackwood," my mother said, her tone suggesting it was probably a waste of time. "Apparently they're buying some artwork. The ceremony starts at 2 p.m., I added. "I need to be there early, but you can arrive just before it begins." I grabbed my keys and headed for the door, pausing only to add, "Oh, and dress formally. There will be press coverage." I left them standing in the kitchen, bewildered. For once, they couldn't dismiss my invitation with their usual condescension. The Blackwood name carried too much weight. At the museum, I spent the morning working with the curators to ensure everything was perfect. My entire series, Reflections of Trauma, was displayed in a dedicated gallery. Seeing my work in this space, with its soaring ceilings and perfect lighting, made my heart swell with pride. Marcus found me adjusting the angle of one of my paintings. "Are you ready?" he asked gently, Your family confirmed they're coming." I nodded, smoothing down my new dress. The first designer piece I'd ever owned, bought with my advance from the museum. "I'm ready." The gallery began filling with people around 1:30 p.m. Art critics, collectors, museum board members, and press representatives mingled, sipping champagne and discussing my work. At 1:55 p.m., I saw them, my parents, looking uncomfortable but impressed despite themselves by their surroundings. My mother wore her best dress, the one reserved for charity galas and country club events. My father had chosen his power suit, the one he wore to close important business deals. They looked like they belonged here, among the elite of the art world, but their expressions betrayed their confusion. I watched as they entered the gallery containing my work. My mother's eyes widened as she recognized the pieces she'd seen me creating in my childish pursuit of art. My father's face froze as he noticed my signature on each painting, prominently displayed beside works that now commanded the attention of the art world's most respected figures. The museum director stepped up to the podium precisely at 2 p.m. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this historic occasion. Today, the Blackwood Museum is proud to announce the acquisition of the complete Reflections of Trauma series, along with a special commission for 3 additional works by the remarkably talented Sophia Martinez." I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath as I walked to the podium. The director continued, "This acquisition, valued at $2.8 million, represents one of our largest commitments to an emerging artist in the museum's history." The room burst into applause. Through the camera flashes and appreciative murmurs, I could see my parents' faces, pale, shocked, their worldview visibly crumbling. "I would like to invite the artist to say a few words," the director said, stepping aside. I took his place at the podium, my hands steady, my voice clear. Art has always been more than just creating beautiful images for me. It's about expressing the deepest truths of human experience, about finding beauty in our broken places, and about believing in your vision even when no one else does. My eyes found my parents in the crowd. Some people see art as a waste of time, as something less valuable than conventional careers. But art has the power to move people, to heal them, to make them see the world differently. That's what I've always believed, and that's what I've worked to achieve with every piece I create. The speech continued, but I could see my parents were barely listening. They were looking around the room, watching as wealthy collectors and influential critics nodded in agreement with my words. They were seeing, perhaps for the first time, their daughter as others saw her, not as a failure, but as a rising star in the art world. After the ceremony, during the reception, they approached me cautiously. My mother spoke first, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Sophia, we had no idea." "No," I said quietly, taking a sip of champagne. "You didn't." "Why didn't you tell us about this?" my father demanded, though his usual authoritative tone was dampened by obvious discomfort. "Would you have believed me?" I asked simply. "Would you have supported me, or would you have found a way to dismiss this too?" Before they could answer, Marcus appeared at my side. "Sophia, the curator from the Modern Art Museum in Paris would like to discuss your next series. They're very interested in being the first to feature your new work." I turned to my parents, whose eyes had grown even wider at the mention of Paris. "If you'll excuse me, I have some business to discuss." As I walked away with Marcus, I heard my mother whisper to my father, "James, our daughter is worth millions now. How did we not see it?" The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes. I moved out of my parents' house and into a spacious loft studio in the city's arts district. My Instagram following exploded after the Blackwood acquisition was announced, and galleries worldwide began contacting me about showing my work. My parents attempted to reconcile in their own way. My mother started mentioning my success to anyone who would listen, conveniently forgetting the years she'd spent belittling my choices. My father tried to offer financial advice about managing my newfound wealth, as if that could make up for years of dismissing my passion as worthless. One morning, about a month after the ceremony, my father called me. "Sophia, your mother and I have been thinking. Perhaps we were too harsh about your art." I sat in my studio, surrounded by half-finished canvases for my Paris exhibition. "Perhaps." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Well, yes, we were wrong. And we thought, maybe you could paint something for our house. Your mother would love to have one of your pieces in the living room." I picked up my brush, adding a stroke of vibrant red to the canvas before me. I'm sorry, Dad, but my work is currently committed to galleries and museums through the next 2 years. There's quite a waiting list for commissions. But we're family, he protested. Yes, I agreed, stepping back to examine my work. We are. And family should believe in each other, shouldn't they? Even when they don't understand each other's dreams. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy with understanding. Today, my work hangs in major museums around the world. My latest series sold for $5.4 million, and I have a 2-year waiting list for private commissions. My parents' house remains without one of my paintings. But that's okay. Some things can't be fixed with money or success. What matters is that I prove them wrong, not by arguing or fighting, but by believing in myself and my art when no one else would. Every time I stand in front of a blank canvas now, I remember those years of doubt and dismissal, and I pour that emotion into my work. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong, it's about proving yourself right. My new studio has a wall of windows overlooking the city. Sometimes when the light hits just right, I can see my reflection in the glass, not the failure my parents once saw, but the artist I always knew I could be. And that view, that validation of my life's chosen path, is worth more than any $1 million sale. The art world now knows my name, and galleries compete to showcase my work. But more importantly, I know who I am, not just an artist who proved her critics wrong, but a woman who stayed true to her vision despite years of doubt and disapproval. Last week, I received an invitation to give a commencement speech at my old university's art school graduation. As I prepare my speech, I think about what I want to tell these young artists facing their own doubters and critics. Perhaps I'll tell them that success isn't just about talent or luck, it's about believing in your vision even when no one else does. About creating art not to prove others wrong, but because your soul demands it. And maybe, just maybe, I'll tell them about a young artist who once painted in her childhood bedroom, surrounded by disapproval and doubt, but who never stopped believing in the power of her art to change lives, including her own. Because in the end, that's what this journey has taught me. Your passion isn't worthless just because others can't see its value. Sometimes you have to be the first one to believe in your dreams. The rest of the world will catch up eventually.